Kind of scary seeing a massive animal like that right in the distance as you're walking through the bush. The dog doesn't like it. Come on. So it was probably about almost 20 years ago now since I had that dream. And it's a dream that has affected my life more than any other. Could I say it affected my life, or that it reflected my life? Would my life have been any different if I hadn't have had that dream? Possibly not. Anyway, this dream I had when I was living back in Obelisk, and it ended with a sentence that I'll never forget. Something that's stayed with me for a long time. It was a doctor. I was in his consultation office, probably something to do back then with all the doctors I had to see about a problem I had with my knuckle. I had this terrible wart which I got burnt off, and the guy who burnt it off was a really old doctor, and I think he botched up the job and my knuckle got infected. Anyway, long story short, I've now got a scar where they had to cut what was left of the infection out and stitch it back up again. I couldn't actually bend my finger for a while. I just had to slowly stretch the skin back so that I could actually have a knuckle again. It's pretty good now. But anyway, it was around the time then when I was seeing doctors to try to figure out how I could get rid of this horrible problem with my knuckle. That's probably why it was a doctor who said this sentence to me that affected me so much. So it was an old doctor, much like the doctor that burnt this off actually and did a botchy job, but anyway, I doubt that has any connection. It was an old doctor. He had an accent. One of those, European type accents. And I can't remember I think what I was there for was to interview him about his paranormal experiences, because around that time I was interested, as I still am interested, in parapsychology, and around that time I was actually doing some interviews with people, part of my push to answer some big questions about the world and what was really out there, and whether this paranormal stuff was actually real or not. I ended up sticking up posters and putting them around different places, calling for people who had interesting paranormal experiences and interviewing them. I only interviewed about 3 people in the end, but that's a side story. That's why that part of it would have been incorporated into the dream. So I was interviewing this doctor about in the dream, about his paranormal experiences, and I remember in the dream feeling a bit surprised that he had given me his time in his practice, mind you, between patients, to interview him and ask him about his life and his paranormal experience. So when I went in there, I was already a bit confused as to why he would be giving me so much of his time. He was obviously he was a specialist of some sort, I remember that, so he obviously, the time I spent in his office was worth hundreds of dollars, no doubt, to him. This is all in the dream, mind you. So yeah, I'd been interviewing him about his paranormal experience, and I was kind of trying to get around to something. I knew that this doctor was holding back somehow with some kind of information, something interesting. Somehow I knew that he was holding back. And I got to the stage in the interview where I just said to him, look, so what is the most profound, what is the most amazing, profound experience that you've ever had in your life? Just hoping there's no motorbikes coming along on this track. Yes, there is. Come on, pup. Come on. Anyway, as I was saying, I said to this doctor, I was sick of mucking around, sick of the interview. I knew that he was holding out somehow. And I said to him, so what is the most profound, life-changing experience that you have ever had in your life? And he looked at me and he said, You are, Ben, meeting you. And I felt my blood run cold. Not only in the dream, but I think also lying there on the bed in the waking world, dreaming the dream. I felt my blood run cold. Just that moment was just so amazing. And then he said to me something along the lines of, when will you stop all this silly juvenile nonsense of deceiving people and just basically living the life of a delinquent? When will you come around to your true calling? And then he said the sentence that just affected me so much, mainly because I could remember it word for word, as quite often is the case in a dream. When you wake up, you can actually remember what the last words were that were spoken in the dream, translate them into something verbal. And he said to me, set a date for your memoirs to be written and write them. And that's when I woke up, when he said that. Set a date for your memoirs to be written and write them. So at the time I had this dream, I was attempting to write some sort of, I was only young, so the idea of writing memoirs at that age was obviously not what I had in mind, but I was at the time attempting to put down on paper a summary of all my ideas that I had back then. I had a lot of ideas back then. I used to write down my ideas in a little journal. I even used to include little diagrams to try to explain what I was talking about. And they were metaphysical ideas. Ideas on what life is, what life was. So yeah, that was the dream that I had. Those were the words that he spoke. Set a date for your memoirs to be written and write them. And that dream's affected me for basically all of my life. I've tried time and time again to get something down on paper that I was happy with, that I could publish. Memoirs, I guess, in a way, but mainly my ideas on life was what I wanted to get down in a solid form, in a book form, something that I could be proud of, something that I wrote and was happy with and could publish and could put that effort into getting it out there. And I certainly did try to do what the doctor ordered. I certainly did try to write my memoirs. I've got pages and pages of things that I've written. But I never wrote something that I was happy with. I never wrote something that I knew would be interesting, profound, world-changing. Whatever I wrote was just average. Not necessarily the content, but the way that I wrote it was no good. In the end, I'm not much of a writer, really. I'm just not cut out to be a writer. I've tried, and it takes me hours and days and weeks and sometimes even months just to write, just to be happy with a small piece of writing. And even then, it's not necessarily as good as I'd want it to be. So what I've decided to do is just make videos of my memoirs. Just make a video recollection of my memories, of my life, everything I thought I would ever include in a manifesto, I'll include in YouTube videos instead. Because what I found is it's quite easy to get my ideas across just rambling away to the camera. And so then what better way to get this book across but in video form? I mean, the way the world's going anyway, no one reads books anymore. You get out of the developed world, the first world, and you don't see anyone in an airport reading a book. It's only in these rich countries where people actually read, and it's usually only the older generation anyway. Young people don't read anymore. I don't read anymore. I don't know what I'm trying to be a writer for when I don't actually even read. So yeah, that's the plan. Hopefully it'll work out. I think I'll start the memoirs at that specific time when I was living there in Obelisk, when I had that dream, just to give you a general picture of my life, what it was like back then. I don't want to go back too far because that would get very tedious. Just want to include the important stuff. So that's the plan. Wish me luck, and hopefully some people watch these videos. If not, at least I would have done what I know deep down I really always wanted to do, was to get my ideas across, put them out there for people to look at, listen to, read, watch, and see what they make of it. Nobody watches my videos. It won't matter, because at least I would have done what I've always wanted to do. I'm getting older now, I'm 41, so I can't mess around. I've got to try and get this done. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll have the first video uploaded soon of my memoirs.